There was at least one person from Alabama arrested yesterday at the Capitol. Falkville resident Lonnie Zoffman was arrested and faces numerous charges regarding carrying a handgun without a license. In Athens, resident Kevin Greason was one of the 3 people who died from medical emergencies at the riot. His family members say he died of a heart attack. Last night, we reported that several IED devices were found near the Capitol. It was confirmed today that those were indeed explosive devices. ATF's special response team played an integral role in making sure the Capitol was safe. Their work was coordinated from Redstone Arsenal. The big question is, how in the world did rioters get through security, especially since the president had urged his followers for weeks to come to D.C.? Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel has the latest.
Violence at the United States Capitol Wednesday by a mob of what appear to be Trump supporters is prompting urgent questions about the massive breach of security. Many are asking why law enforcement wasn't better prepared.
I think that a more robust presence on the grounds of the Capitol would have prevented people from getting into the building.
Capitol Police, with a force of more than 2,000 officers, were unable to stop the out-of-control crowds from breaching the building. The department's chief issuing a statement saying, quote, "The USCP had a robust plan established to address anticipated First Amendment activities, but make no mistake, these mass riots were not First Amendment activities. They were criminal riotous behavior." The Metropolitan Police Department stepping in to assist Capitol Police, also taking heat for the number of arrests described as low. The chief explaining his officers were focused on taking control of the situation.
Then and only then are we able to safely make arrests. Because as you begin to make arrests, now we get into additional use of forces, additional injuries of officers.
Meanwhile, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer saying Thursday he plans on firing Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Mike Stenger once Democrats take control of the Senate later this month.
It was appalling how ill-prepared the Congress was for these attacks. He must go. He did a terrible, terrible job.
Some 6,000 National Guard troops are now stationed in the nation's capital and will remain through President-elect Biden's inauguration. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.